So I'm going to start this out and just talk about a couple of things. One is we never really want to trust that these edges are square, and so we're going to work off of that. But I'm going to start here. You can see my piece of foam core, there's a little bit messed up. I want to use a sharp pencil that I can erase. I want to use a mechanical pencil would be fine. I believe that this board is 20 inches long. And so we're going to make a cube that is 3 inches. This is 3 inches right here. 3 inches in all the critical dimensions. So that should give us enough where we can get multiple cubes at 3 inches. So the next thing I'm going to do is I've got this fancy ruler, but any triangle will do, and it's just a matter of precision. This one's kind of nice because I can set it up where the grid, I can see through that grid and line everything up. And so up near the top, there are a number of different ways to get something square. I prefer to measure a couple of times. So I've lined that up, and I'm going to measure out 3 inches. 1, 2, 3. And if I do one up near the top, and I come down here near the bottom, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to be precise there. And I should be able to connect those dots, and I can use maybe a longer straight edge to do that. I'm looking at this, I'm thinking about the thickness of the pencil, thinking about all the things that could potentially make this inaccurate and trying to correct for those. So there's a 3-inch gap. Let's just measure it in a couple of places. And then somewhere down here I need to start. So like I said, this is a board from Walmart. It's 20 inches, which means I've got an inch to play with on either side, and I can still get six pieces out, which is what I need to make my cube. So at every 3 inches, I'm going to place a mark. And now I'm going to use this triangle and use the long edge and ultimately put a mark where I want to cut these. Now, if we were making something in the wood shop or somewhere else, we might have what you'll experience, which is kerf. I can't measure it exactly. I would need to leave some space in between each of these measurements, because the blade ultimately, on like a bandsaw or a table saw or whatever type of saw, the blade is going to take out material and create sawdust. This, with how sharp and small our blade is, we're not going to get any kerf. See, as I line it up with that tick mark, I actually take my pencil and I'll put it on the edge and I'll rotate it to get to that right point. I'll try to. Sometimes your lighting can make some of this difficult. This is actually very easy since my light source is very bright. And right there, I can see it. When I flip it around to the other side, it's not quite as easy to see. So now, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and cut this all the way through the edge with my X-Acto blade. And a nice long straight edge. And so, one thing that you have to be careful of is making sure that your straight edge doesn't move. And so also, when you're looking at this, you want to kind of look at, is my blade actually hitting the line, or is my blade moving over to the left or to the right? I have used this blade just a little bit, but for the most part, it's fairly new. And whenever you can, if you start feeling that blade get dull, you want to replace it. So there's a couple of things to think about right now. One is I'm not going to cut like this. I'm going to bring it down at an angle that looks like it's about 30 degrees. And I also want to make sure that I'm not angling it out this way or angling it out this way. And then the first thing that I want to do with this cut is actually go through and just penetrate that top layer of paper, focusing on keeping it straight up and down, but at that angle. And once I've cut through the top sheet of paper, then I can kind of put a lot of pressure down and then come through the whole thing. And that should cut fairly smooth, and so what you might want to do is check and see if that's a right angle or if you're getting some angles, and then you might work on that, because it will affect how we ultimately end up. It will affect the craft and the precision of our cube at the end of the day. So I'm going to do that again. Angle this way, straight up and down, not angled this way. Just come through, hit that top layer of paper. The foam, it cuts through pretty easily. It's the paper that gives it resistance. And then the second. Putting a lot of pressure on that second one. So now we've got a piece that is pretty square, that cuts pretty square. And before we move on to the next step, and before we cut the rest of this stuff out, I actually want to go ahead and rabbet cut I'm trying to remember if I rabbet cut it all or not. I don't need to rabbet cut it all. So in fact, let's take the top two here and cut them off. Because I know I can rabbet all at once, a little bit of it. So notice the cut again, an angle cutting halfway through, cut the rest of the way through. A nice crisp edge both on the top and on the bottom. Okay, so rabbet cuts. This material is 3/16 thick. And so what we want to do with this rabbet cut is we want to come in 3/16. So let's measure this first. 3/16 is right there. Three-sixteenths, right there. I'm going to put this right on that. You may draw a line with your pencil, or you may just go ahead and decide at this point you're going to use your X-Acto blade. And so, just like earlier, I'm going to penetrate through that top layer. And at this point, I'm going to put just a little bit more pressure, but when I feel a little bit of resistance from that bottom layer of paper, I'm going to try not to cut through it. So my goal is that I've cut through this all the way up until that layer of paper. And so now I'm going to take the blade and be very careful. Try and get it right on top of the paper. Be very cognizant of where your other hand is as you do something like this. You don't want that blade coming anywhere near it because it can easily slip through the paper. And get your finger if it's in the way. So I'm going to need to cut a little bit more through here. Let's see if that pops it off. It does. And so I will tell you this is pretty good other than right through here. Let's see if this blade is sharp enough to take off any more of that foam. Like so. It's better if you don't have any of that extra to begin with, because ultimately that's going to push it out from the edge. Some people would take even sandpaper to this and a sanding block to get some of that foam off. My recommendation is that you just figure out how to do precise rabbet cuts a little bit better than what I just demonstrated. Okay, so if I think about this, I gotta have each of these. Well, it would be better if this went around like so, and so I could actually have a top piece. The reason why we do that rabbet cut is we want this to nestle in there. I could have this, each of these pieces kind of move around and be the sides, and I could have this as the top and this is the bottom, which would mean I could rabbet cut this other edge. So here again, I could draw a line, or I could just try and get this with the X-Acto blade. Just try and pierce that top layer. It's way more important on these. Sometimes you might be able to get away with just a hard amount of pressure with a normal cut when you're cutting through. On this, you do just want to be extremely careful. So, same thing. Just want to push that in. And I will tell you, these X-Acto blades, they are sharp enough to cut through like the paper at this angle. In fact, I may be doing it right now. But I'm being a little bit more careful with this one. Started to cut through the thinness of the paper. So I'm coming back and starting to do it again. That's when you have to be real careful, because you'll get some resistance, and then if you come out of that, you'll lose that resistance, and it may, that blade may move quicker than you want. So you can see a couple of places where I actually, right in here, I cut through the thinness of the paper and then had to come back. So you don't want to do that either. That's not foam, that's paper right there. And if you can get it out, that's fine. I don't think you ultimately need to worry about it. Okay, so now I've got 4 sides started. You want to, when you begin to cut these other pieces, you want to be careful. I'm just cutting off this. You want to be careful, since I've already rabbit cutted this, I want to be real careful with my angle and making sure that it's straight up and down here. Otherwise you'll have just a little bit of a wiggle with that straight line there at the end where there's no foam. So there's one piece. Two. Three. And I guess I'd already cut that off. 4. Now hopefully these all are just kind of perfectly smooth and the exact same height, which they're pretty darn close. Because when I start to put this cube together, that's going to be vitally important. Okay, so what I was thinking earlier is that these would be the tops and the bottoms. And so now what I can do is on each of these, I can just rabbit cut one edge. Now, I'm going to show you a trick, or at least I thought I was going to show you a trick. Nope, I'm just going to do it. Just going to do it the same way I have been doing it. I'm going to use this to line that up, the width that I need to go. Probably be a better option to measure that out. But if you get a template, why not use it? Okay, so there's a piece. I basically want to do that same thing over and over again. So let's make those measurements. Let's see the 16th. lastly, I will need 2 of these. Now, what you'll learn as you go through and you build multiple cubes is which construction method you prefer, where you prefer to put the rabbet cuts and rabbet joints. I actually think I used to do it the opposite. I think I used to do a full rabbet all the way around the tops and the bottoms, and then leave the top and the bottom on these. But this is a new way. So I've got this rubber cement from J&M, but any rubber cement should work. And then I also have this little guy, which when the rubber cement solidifies and dries, you can use that to pick it up. So what I like about this rabbet is I'm basically just going to fill in. I'm actually going to fill in. Let's just try and fill in all 3 edges of this. And you want to let this rubber cement set for just a minute. So you can go ahead and basically do it to all of these. You want to make sure you're getting liquid on there, but you also don't want to be too liberal with how much you apply. That's going to be probably too much. That dripping that just happened. Hopefully you can see through some of the reflections here just about how much. Ooh, that's more than I want. That's way more than I want. In fact, I'm probably going to grab a paper towel in just a second and try and get some of that off. You know what? I'll just grab it with the brush. Okay, so now I've got 4. Like I said, you kind of want to let this set for a second. So, as we said earlier, I'm basically going to join these like this. That should be, if I made my cut straight up and down, that should be a right angle. We'll check it in a minute. I'm going to do that one last. Here we go. And then lastly, here's this one. That should be just about the perfect amount of time for all of those edges of rubber cement to set. What I didn't do that I probably should, in fact, I'm going to go, well, you know what? What would be better is if you actually applied some rubber cement to the areas where those corners were meeting. So that's the one edge that I did not apply rubber cement. I do have some on this edge already. And so with the top and the bottom, I really just need to hit kind of the foam and that bottom edge, and I can be a little bit more liberal. I see I have a slight angle right there, and that may mess up my whole cube, but we'll see. Give that just a second set. let's look at this one. If anything, I would want the smaller edges towards the inside. So as I look at this and I look at my angles, I think that's fine. Let that one set for a second. This one's been setting for just a minute. So I'm going to take it and try and fit it in there. And it should fit pretty well. Flip it over, and then this one should set in there just fine. If I made precise measurements and precise cuts. If you have any small gaps as a result of your precision, it would be better if they were consistent. So I'm seeing a larger gap right there, which is something that I really, really don't want. And it's probably a result of not measuring the inside of that rabbit cut quite accurately. But after it dries, as some of this dries, you can take the rubber cement pickup, and basically you can drag it along those edges. Be careful how you drag it. You don't want to mess up one of the edges, clean edges of your foam cord. As you drag it along, right here you can see there's a whole lot of rubber cement, and so you can almost see as I run this way what's happening. It's picking it up. As I said in class the other day, you're kind of making rubber cement boogers. So I'm looking for any other place. And as this is the first one that I have built like this in 2 years, it's not great. It's not perfect. What we're looking for on this assignment, and even when you see like kind of some of the, maybe you can see just right there that there's a dip in that paper, maybe inconsistency. Looks like that's the worst kind of edge and part that I've got, but we're looking for crisp and clean edges where that paper comes together and there's a consistent kind of joint, or when those two pieces of paper come together, you're addressing that in a way that it's consistent. This, I'll tell you, that mistake might take this down to like this might be a C cube, right? So it's pretty solid, it's pretty good. It's holding together pretty well. My application of the rubber cement was just fine, but that's not an A. It's maybe a low B at best, and borderline C. So our goal on this project is to begin to develop patience and craft. And by craft, it means that you approach things with the measure twice, cut once. You think very seriously about the thickness of your pencil when you measure things, where you put that tick mark, the angle of your X-Acto blade as you cut it. We want precision. That's the goal. Obviously, we're not grading you on design when we're just making a cube.